Good evening, friends. While the season has been over for most of you for a long, long time, we are actually winding down to the actual end. 4 teams left, 2 games to a championship. I'm Ryan, part-time ninjas. He's Dan, dancing squirrels. Dan, how you doing this evening, buddy?
I thought we were just getting together to talk about Christmas.
Oh no. While I am festive, you'll also notice this very lonely trophy that's waiting on its friend.
It will never get another friend. It
A
will be
mere
alone forever.
a mere 10 feet away, but
Absolutely
still in the bubble wrap because I was not going to touch it until
alone,
it was time.
alone forever.
I hope not. That's the goal to end this week. Well, I guess next week, but it starts with this week. Last week, crazy quarterfinal matchups where each game was decided by fewer than 2 points. Taylor pulls it out over JR. Horvath pulls it out over Terry. First time Horvath's beat Terry this season. So this week, it is me versus Horvath. It is Taylor versus Darren. There was some Thursday night action. As always, these shows get shorter and shorter as we get closer to the end of the year. So, Dan, let's get started with, you went 3-3 last week. I went 2-4. So you picked up another game in the prediction contest. You were at 64 wins to my 60 wins. So thankfully, we still have some games left for me to try to make a run here. Draft order is the same right now. We'll have a little bit more clarity on draft order at the end of this week because the 5th place game will be decided. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. There's also some points up for grabs, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. So, Dan, as we did last week for the losers bracket, consolation bracket, I guess that should be more nice. For the consolation bracket in the 5th place game, I just think we run through them. If you want to add anything, feel free to add it. The guys who won last week are Greg, Stevie, Eric, and Rob P. So let's start with Greg versus Stevie. I do want to point out that winning 2 games in the consolation bracket does earn you a point of luck. And even if you lost last week, you still have a chance if you win your next 2 games because you will get one more matchup. If you lost last week, you need to win this week. So everybody needs to win. However, the winner of these 2 games, Greg and Stevie, Eric and Rob, are going to get a point of luck, Dan. So first up, Greg versus Stevie. What do you got here?
I'm going to take Greg. Both teams aren't real in great shape. Greg's had a good end of the year. He's not starting Joe Flacco. Seems like 2 positives to me.
That Greg has been hot. When I looked over the game, though, it came out as Stevie for me. So I'm going to take Stevie with a chance to get a point back. And then Eric versus Rob P., the 2 newcomers, going for a chance to win the consolation bracket, giving themselves a great chance at the first pick of the draft. I have Eric winning this one, Dan.
Yeah, I have him winning as well. I mean, especially after what he did to me last week. I texted you, I'm pretty sure his 2 biggest weeks of the year were both against me.
I was saving that for the show. So, yeah, I was going to say, I think you had mentioned that his best 2 weeks this season were against you. So he's just coming at you, man.
I don't like it. We can knock this stuff off right now.
So, as I mentioned, the winner of those 2 games, Greg versus Stevie, Eric versus Rob, will automatically get an extra point of luck for winning those games. And then if you win your game next week, you'll get another point of luck. When we look at the bottom half of the bracket, as you mentioned, Dan, you were unable to win. And on top of that, you get your rival Phil that week. And then Kenny versus Motts. Let's start with Kenny versus Motts. I actually have Kenny winning this game, much to, I'm sure, Kenny's chagrin, because he does not like when I pick his team, and it has not worked out real well for him. However, keep in mind, the winner of these 2 games gets a chance to play for luck next week. What do you got, Dan?
I mean, Kenny's starting the best quarterback in the AFC North. Rob is starting half of the worst team in the AFC South. So I'm going to go with Kenny.
Not to mention, I saw a report, and I've had trouble confirming this, that I saw a report that they don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to play. But then he was practicing today, and I haven't found the practice report on today yet. So I don't quite know what's going on with that, but I saw that he wasn't going to play.
He's officially listed as questionable.
Yeah, I saw that. So it's interesting. And then
he did practice today as well.
Okay, and then Zay Jones, who Rob has in his lineup right now, is also questionable for the week, dealing with a hamstring, I believe.
So for Lawrence, he's still in concussion protocol, so he hasn't cleared that yet. So it's really out of their hands. It's up to whether or not he can pass the protocol.
Okay. And that's that's going to be an interesting one. But again, I have Kenny, you have Kenny, and then finally you versus Phil. I did what I always do. I break down the matchups, Dan, and I got Phil beating you in this one.
Nah, Phil's going to take the loss. I wish I was paying more attention, realized that Olave was playing last night. Kind of hurt not to have those 20 points, but I don't need my full lineup to be filled.
I was a little shocked you didn't have Olave, and I went and checked that right away because in one other semifinal matchup I'm in, I did start Olave, and it was a slower first half. I think 3 catches for 53 yards. It's not a ton of points in the first half, but he really came alive in the second half, and I noticed you did not have him in your lineup at all. So.
No, in multiple leagues, actually.
Oh, yikes.
I've just been super busy this week, and
yeah,
it's not like these games really truly matter. So,
hey, you need that. Well, you don't have your first round pick anymore,
no.
so I guess you don't.
Sorry, Kenny.
Sorry, bud. 5th place game. So, reminder on this game, I have set this up so that the winner of this game gets the better draft pick, not the worst draft pick. I don't know if that's going to matter here at all, but they are going to get it. So, the winner of this game gets the 9th pick. The loser gets the 10th pick, but the winner also gets $5 more than the loser does. So, the loser of this game will get their money back, $50. Winner of this game will get 55. Terry versus JR. Again, I took no notes on this matchup because it really doesn't matter. I do have JR coming away as the victor in this one.
Yeah. Terry's team has just been cold. I mean, Jared Goff is the only reason he was even in his game last week. Still feel bad for you, Terry. It sucks to lose by that little margin in the playoffs, even though your team is not championship caliber. Anything can happen. Sorry, buddy. I'm going to go with JR. Feel a little more sorry for JR. I feel like he did have a better team. I was really hoping he'd pull out the win just so we could point out that we told Taylor not to start Fields, and he did it anyway, and that's what cost him. But
yeah,
sorry, he can lose this week.
I don't think that's what cost him, though. Fields scored better than Tua last week.
No, he didn't. Fields scored 5 points. Tua scored 10.
Oh, I thought it was vice versa. Okay, good call. But yeah, like I said, yeah, that was both weird matchups. Everything came down to the wire. Terry got beat by a defense. So
kind of ironic since he rode that Cowboys defense all year.
Yeah, what a week for them not to show up and pull a goose egg for him. Not what Terry had in mind, I'm sure. That is the bracket, my friends. So Taylor takes down JR 121.85 to 121.04. He is facing Darren. Terry loses 92.4 to 93.3, bringing Horvath to take on me. Because I am involved in one of these matchups, we will start with the other matchup. So we have Taylor versus Darren. Taylor starts off Thursday with 24 points, still projected to lose the game by 5. Justin Fields versus Jalen Hurts. Kieran Williams and James Conner versus Joe Mixon and DeAndre Swift. Cooper Kupp and Mike Evans versus Cortland Sutton and Tyreek Hill. David Njoku versus Jake Ferguson. Tyler Boyd versus Raheem Mostert. Tremaine, is it Tremaine? I always get these wrong. TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards taking on Danielle Hunter. Brandon McManus taking on Harrison Butker. Cleveland defense versus the Indianapolis defense. Dan, I have Darren taking home the win on this one. It was a great Thursday night by Kieran Williams, but that Thursday night was a little bit canceled out by Cooper Kupp. And I just think when you look matchup by matchup, and I have way more notes on this, but I want to get some back and forth here. So I have Darren bringing home the win. I don't think Kieran did enough to cancel out what Darren's running backs are likely to do this matchup.
I have Darren winning as well. I mean, Kieran had a great game. I don't know that his running backs are really going to be the big difference. I think what's going to hurt Taylor the most is receivers not having Chase and having Kupp underperform. Really hurts him. I think starting Tyler Boyd's a mistake. Tyler Boyd is not going to replace Jamar Chase in that offense.
Yeah.
Tyler Boyd's going to be in his slot like he always is, getting his same usual targets that he always gets. They do target him a little bit more against Pittsburgh, just because he's from Pittsburgh. I think they enjoy getting him those opportunities there, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really be the right starter at that spot for him.
Would you start Nico Collins without CJ Stroud and dealing with his own injuries, though? It's not like he has a lot of better options.
So I would start Collins over him just because there's no Tank Dell there. There's somebody who's going to be the number 1 there, where Tyler Boyd is looking at potentially being the number 3 for Cincinnati, because typically Trenton Irwin will take that spot when one of the top 2 receivers is out, and he's shown he'll get some targets and he can do some things with them.
It's an interesting take. Obviously, you know the Bengals more than me. Boyd, I have in my notes, it's a shitty week to lose Jamar Chase, but when you're taking on Tyreek Hill, and I think Tyreek Hill is the wild card in all of this. I think Boyd could be a decent play. Again, it's going to be, who are they going to get involved? Because Boyd kind of saved his week. Wasn't that last week where he had like 2 catches, but one was like a 46-yard catch of 53 yards total in the game? So
yeah, it's not. He doesn't get a ton. Doesn't get a ton of targets. He'll probably end up with about 6.5 points.
And I think when you look at the quarterbacks in this matchup, they, in my opinion, they cancel each other out. Normally, I would ask you Tua versus Justin Fields, and I will ask you, but I do think Justin Fields against Arizona at home is the right call this week. And Jalen Hurts playing injured, didn't play great last week against the Seahawks, but did still score 2 rushing touchdowns, if I remember correctly. I think we're going to see a game this week where I think Fields is going to have a Hurts type week, and I think these guys cancel each other out, and I agree with Fields over Tua here.
I agree with Fields over Tua because he has the most upside. I think Tua going against a good Dallas defense, while Dallas hasn't played as well on the road, I still think Fields is the right play, although I don't expect a big game out of Fields either, just because I kind of said this last week. Fields has come out and said he doesn't like playing in cold weather. It's going to be cold. It's going to be windy in Chicago. I mean, it'd be bad. I would actually feel better about Fields if this game was in Arizona.
Was in Arizona instead. Yeah, I think he's going to be all right. At least I'm hoping for Taylor's sake. I look at these running backs, Dan. I see the same running backs. Joe Mixon, obviously not as flashy as Kieran Williams, but the volume is getting it done for him, and I'm not too worried about him at all this week. James Conner had a really good week last week. DeAndre Swift has been down. There could be some points for Taylor to make up there, but the bad week you brought up from Cooper Kupp is, I think, what really hurts Taylor. Before we get into the wide receivers, because I think that's the last thing we really need to discuss, David Njoku, I am in love with since Joe Flacco took over. And Jake Ferguson has really moved into a hit or miss. But David Njoku hasn't scored has only scored fewer than 8 points once over this period of time. But more importantly, over the last 2 weeks, Joe Flacco is the established starter. 23 fantasy points, 24 fantasy points. And Houston still gives up a ton of fantasy points to tight ends. Whereas Jake Ferguson, you don't quite know what that Dallas offense is going to do. He's never had any big pop weeks, and he's been under 10 points for each of the last 2 weeks. I think that's an advantage to Taylor, but I don't know if it's enough to overcome the wide receivers, Dan.
Yeah, I agree. Houston's defense has been pretty bad, giving up a lot. So Njoku could have a big game, but I don't think it's going to be enough to carry Taylor.
Literally, word for word, my notes, Dan. Love Njoku this week. Not enough to beat Tyreek and Mostert. So you have Tyreek and Mostert versus Evans and Boyd based on the matchups we've kind of not talked about yet. I do my little game, Dan, and I think I've told you guys this on the show before, but I'll tell you how I make my predictions. I look at each position, and I think that any position can have a 3 just point advantage, and I don't mean fantasy points. So if your quarterback is great and theirs sucks, I would give you 3 points, and I would work it down position by position. I did this matchup 3 different times at 3 different mindsets just to see if I would come up with anything different. They tied every single time. And if I call a tie, I'm giving the advantage to Tyreek Hill, because no matter how many points of advantage I give Tyreek Hill, he could do double that. He is the best fantasy wide receiver this season that we've seen in a very long time. I know he's hurt, and he is scheduled to play this game. If Tyreek were to miss time or come out and be a decoy, I will not be surprised if I'm wrong and Taylor wins, Dan. But in a tie, ties go to the runner, and Tyreek Hill is the damn runner.
Considering that Tyreek Hill's on this team, would you start Tua just because if Tyreek goes off for a couple of touchdowns, you have those in your pocket as canceling him out?
You could say that, but we also saw that not work for JR last week with Stafford versus Cooper Kupp. So I see exactly what you're saying, because while Deron Bland is this god of a fantasy corner right now, he is, much like I used to say about Trevon Diggs, he is the worst and best corner in the NFL. Gets a ton of picks, a ton of pick sixes. I think he allows the most air yards and the most touchdowns in the league right now. It's a hit or miss kind of play. And I don't know if they're going to try to just double Tyreek the entire time. I don't know the extent of Tyreek's injury. I literally have him on no roster, so I've not dug into it enough. But he's Tyreek Hill, and I'm just not going to bet against him.
I understand.
So, yeah, I think that's the end of that one for me. The defenses are interesting, but I actually love both of these defenses this week. Indianapolis actually has the second most second most defensive touchdowns to the Dallas Cowboys. They're taking on an Atlanta offense that's going to trot Taylor Heineke back out there. So even though you have a Case Keenum-led Houston team, which should play out really, really well for Cleveland, I think Indianapolis could match or even beat them this week. The Danielle Hunter versus TJ Edwards is interesting to me because TJ Edwards is more of the safe play. Danielle Hunter's more of the big swing play. That could be another factor that helps Taylor get some points back. Any final notes for this game, Dan?
I don't know. The Minnesota defense is tough. They're playing at home against Detroit. Detroit's been either hot or cold. I mean, that could go either way.
Yeah.
Hunter could have easily a 3-sack big game. It is Goff.
Yep. And you don't expect that kind of game with TJ Edwards against Kyler Murray. I saw something today that Brian Flores over the last month is blitzing on 50% of his plays. Like you're going to see a lot of pressure in that game against Goff. So that could be very, very interesting, especially a home game for the Minnesota Vikings.
Click on McManus real quick.
Yeah.
So what's he done lately? Because that Jacksonville offense has struggled.
So terrible. Probably not the right play. 1 point against Baltimore, 3 points against Cleveland, only 8 against Cincinnati, and what was a high scoring game, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was the one. Yeah, I was gonna say. So yeah,
he missed some kicks. He missed 2 kicks, I think, that game. At least one for sure.
Yep. Actually, I don't know what my notes are here. Hold on. That's extra points. Oh, I can't see misses. He attempted 2, and then it looks like he made 2. But again,
he definitely missed 1. I remember paying attention as a Bengals.
So you would certainly know better than me. Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe Taylor taking kicker for granted there. I don't know. Actually, here we got time to kill. That's what this show's about. On waivers right now, Greg Joseph in that Minnesota game against Detroit. Will Lutz, Denver taking on New England. Why my shit won't scroll, I don't know. Daniel Carlson against Kansas City. Probably not buying much into that offense. Certainly don't want the Jets offense. What do you think about Chris Boswell taking on Cincinnati? He's at home in that matchup.
It comes down to who you trust. You trust them starting Mason Rudolph at quarterback and being able to move the ball a lot.
And Boswell is worse than McManus over
the kicker I like most is probably up at the top. Well, I would actually consider Chicago's kicker against Arizona.
So that's a strategy I've employed before where you get the points no matter what happens. And then Chicago's kicker pretty red hot lately, going back to week 10, 12 points, 17 points, 14 points, 10, 6 against Cleveland, but that was an ugly, wet game. Whereas in this one, I don't know quite what the Chicago weather is, but Cairo Santos has been kicking in Chicago for a long time. Interesting point there, that maybe kicker is somewhere Taylor needs to look to gain an advantage there. So food for thought if you're listening out there, Taylor. Bringing us to the final matchup, me versus Steve Horvath. Right now, projected to win by 4. We each had no Thursday players. We got Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey and David Montgomery versus Tony Pollard and Bijan Robinson, Tyler Lockett and Drake London taking on Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. That just hurts my soul to say. Travis Kelce versus Hunter Henry, Michael Pittman, who cleared concussion protocol and is now going to make me make a decision, taking on Isaiah Pacheco, Zaire Franklin versus Hassan Reddick, Brandon Aubrey, Evan McPherson, Cincinnati Bengals defense, Philadelphia defense. It's my matchup, Dan. Go ahead and get us started.
So I'm torn. I want to pick you just because then if you win, it doesn't hurt as bad. Because I know you're going to pick yourself because that's what you do. But actually, I think Horvath's in a better situation from a matchup standpoint. McCaffrey going against Baltimore isn't great. You can't be feeling great about how Mahomes has played lately at all.
My first note.
What Raiders team is going to show up? I mean, even when they lost 3-0, the defense still played well.
Yeah.
Crosby could have a big game. I like Allen going against what the Chargers look like they've given up.
Yeah, 63 points to the Raiders last.
I think the thing that should scare you the most, in my opinion, is Bijan. With the Falcons coaching staff basically coaching for their jobs at this point, are they going to finally turn him loose?
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that's going to cost you is actually starting the Bengals defense.
Really?
Yeah.
Against Mason Rudolph, you think that's going to be a concern for me?
Yeah, I do. Because here's the thing: if you're Pittsburgh, what's your game plan going to be for that?
To run the hell out of the ball.
And the Bengals' run defense has been doing what this year? Ranked 31, and they lost their best run defender in DJ Reader for the rest of the year.
Interesting.
They could the Bengals could just load the box and know they're going to try and run and be able to stop them. I just don't think you're going to have a big game out of them. Okay. I don't think you're in any risk of giving up negative points, but I think your ceiling is maybe 12 points.
So the issue is, if you guys all saw my transactions this week, I wanted to go. I had Denver and Cincinnati as my 2 picks. Denver taking on the New England Patriots this week. New England I don't want to say getting hot because that's just a misnomer, but they've certainly put up points against bad defenses. And Denver has allowed a shit ton of points lately. I looked at their games last week, their games over the last 3 weeks. Cincinnati felt like the better play versus Denver when it came to the matchups.
Just the Bengals defense is beat up. I mean, their number one corner, Awuzie, has been awful all year. Yeah. Their number 2 corner is hurt for the game. He's not playing. So they have a rookie starting at the second corner spot. And then their third, they have Mike Hilton as their slot corner, but then their third outside corner they bring in, I didn't catch what is the MRI results, but he's out for the year. So I'm guessing it's a torn ACL. So the third outside corner they're bringing in, I believe, will probably be a guy named Davis who's just got awful. There's some concerns there for me. If Pittsburgh decides, hey, we're going to chuck it deep a few times, I think there's going to be some opportunities for them to have a couple big plays against some of those corners. I mean, we know the Pittsburgh receivers aren't going to run block downfield, but
I was just going to say there's also some drama going on in Pittsburgh, and I don't know which Pittsburgh team is even going to show up because you have Jaylen Warren publicly throwing George Pickens under the bus right now, too.
Oh, their whole team is in disarray. But again, and Pittsburgh could just not show up. They could be like, oh, Mason Rudolph going to lead our team with his nose so bright on Christmas weekend.
Jesus Christ. I was going to make a joke about him taking a helmet off and beating somebody with it. So.
Did you catch when the Browns and Pittsburgh played last that one of their players' helmets got ripped off and Myles Garrett picked it up?
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah, I saw that. So, well, you hit the start of my notes perfectly, and that is my new nickname for Patrick Mahomes, which is Mid-Homes, because he has just been midding all over fantasy football. It has been tragic because I have him in so many leagues, but looking specifically in our league where he has put up not a single 20-point week since week 7. And even when you look at that, that is his third 20-point week of the entire season and hasn't done it again since then. Obviously, the Raiders are a team that he has history with, put up 18 against them the last time they faced off. They still need to win this game. They're still playing for, first seed in the AFC. There's a lot they're got going on in Kansas City. So I'm not worried about Kansas City not showing up for this game. I'm just worried about Travis Kelce. I said this last week, does not look right to me. He does not look like the Travis Kelce I've watched for years upon years upon years. And then on the other side of the field, Hunter fucking Henry, the other side of the field for Horvath's team. Hunter Henry has been on fire the last 2 weeks and now gets a defense that gives up the most fantasy points and the most touchdowns to fantasy tight ends. That terrifies me. This is the one advantage I'm supposed to have every single week that I don't have because of what is going on in that game right now. So you got Mid-Homes playing just absolutely terrible. Allen is balling, maybe not necessarily through the air, but he's finding the rushing touchdowns. And you brought it up, Dan. The Chargers have given up. I think I won't be the least bit surprised if they allow another 63 points this week. Horvath just needs to hope it's not all going to James Cook. So I think his advantage at wide receiver and quarterback are too much. We haven't even got into the wide receivers. I am picking Horvath. He won the game. I almost want to pivot to myself just for a chance to A, be right, and B, get a point back from you, but I would rather just be right on this pick. I mean, I want to be wrong. Let's be very clear. CMC, I'm not worried about going up against Baltimore. CMC gets his no matter what, but so does CeeDee Lamb. And I think we're getting back to seeing a more functional offense in Minnesota where you're going to see Justin Jefferson get more and more involved. Last week, things kind of fell Jordan Addison's way. I think we're going to see more Justin Jefferson. And then it breaks my heart to say this. When you look at Horvath's team, he's probably better on defense and special teams. You already brought up the Cincinnati thing. Philadelphia with a home game against the rival New York Giants, a game Philadelphia needs to win, especially after what's happened in the last 3 weeks. Evan McPherson, great kicker. Aubrey, I think, cancels it out a little bit. But then
here's the thing. Now you got to hope Horvath needs to hope McPherson cancels out Aubrey because Aubrey is the number one kicker, in my opinion, in the league, if not actually.
He is. Oh, he's definitely the number one kicker. He has, I guess I don't want to say he slowed down. Obviously, he had that great week in week 14 against you. And then a terrible week against Buffalo last week. Zaire Franklin's been hit or miss, whereas Hassan Reddick's more that guy who gets you the big points or no points. So I'm hoping for a no point week. But he had, 2 points last week, 15 points the week before. You're going up against Tommy Cutlets. I think it's going to be a better week than better week than a bad week. Michael Pittman is the one that has me terrified. As I mentioned, we haven't talked much about the wide receiver. So I have Pittman in my flex just in case I needed to move him out. But when we look at the flex and wide receiver group as a whole, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and then Isaiah Pacheco, he's throwing a running back in there. I'm going with my normal inconsistent bunch, and I have a fun story. It'll make you feel a little bit better in a bit. But I'm looking at my normal inconsistent bunch. Tyler Lockett taking on Tennessee, who has given up a lot of passing yards. Drake London now with Taylor Heineke going against Indianapolis, who has given up a ton of passing yards. Michael Pittman taking on Atlanta, who first and foremost isn't a great matchup, and he just got out of concussion protocol today. The issue is I don't love my bench. Ramondre Stevenson already out. I'm not starting Tyjae Spears. Josh Palmer, Buffalo, not been a great matchup. Parker Washington is only picked up in case Zay Jones was out, and I was flirting with the idea of losing Michael Pittman. But then there's Deontay Johnson, and you brought up you think your Cincinnati defense could get beaten. I don't know about starting one of my receivers against my own defense unless I'm just looking at a full pivot here. My takeaway is the reason I'm not going to beat Horvath is Josh Allen in this wide receiver group. Is there any hope for my wide receivers, Dan? I don't think there is.
Oh, I think there's absolutely a world where your receivers can cancel out his receivers. Obviously, if I had to pick which one I would want to start, it'd be his. London, the switch at quarterback would make me nervous.
Yeah.
Because he's been doing really well with Ritter lately. I don't know what he did last weekend, but I know before that he was doing well. Same with Pittman.
Last week, well, I said 2 weeks ago, he smashed with that game against Tampa Bay, and then only 4 points, 2 catches for 24 yards the week after. So,
yeah. It just comes down to what happens with Dallas, man. Because if they go into Miami and play like that, how they did last week in Buffalo, that could hurt him. But I like his team better. I think he's in a better spot matchup wise. If you ask me who I think is from the Kansas City team has the best chance at having a big week, I would say it's Pacheco.
Yeah.
Over Kelsey and your boy Mahomes.
Well, and it also seems like the more Jerick McKinnon gets involved, thankfully it seems to screw me and Horvath because Pacheco was oddly quite involved with the passing game, but this is McKinnon's time of year. So heavily involved the last couple of weeks with Pacheco out. It'll be interesting to see if they keep feeding him the ball.
Scroll down to the bottom because I think Horvath also has Bosa.
Yeah, now that I think about it, when I did the matchup for this, it was against Bosa where I said he had the advantage because I'm not that big of a Hassan Reddick guy. I am a Hassan Reddick guy.
If he puts Bosa, that'd be interesting. I don't know. I mean, Lamar doesn't get a ton of sacks, but that San Francisco defense is decent. It could be a tough matchup for them. That could be an interesting play if he puts Bosa in there.
I also think, and I shouldn't say this out loud, I think Calvin Ridley on his bench against Tampa Bay, who has just been torched by wide receivers, unless Trevor Lawrence is out. I think Calvin Ridley should probably find a way into this lineup.
What did Ridley do last week with an injured Lawrence?
That would be just about 7 fantasy points. So, I mean, to be honest, he hasn't done anything since week 12. It's probably not the wrong call. Clearly, that's just an underrated or underwhelming offense, which is why Rob is in the bad situation he's been in. So,
yeah.
Well, now you got me worried about the Bengals defense, but we are both picking Horvath. Lee, welcome back, buddy. We're working on it. Right now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you because I don't know any other way to be. The whole league sounds like they're coming back, but if there's an opening, it's yours. No debate about it this year whatsoever. I screwed you over last year. That's on me, not on you. The league would love to have you in. Guys,
I tried to get you, buddy.
You did.
I got outvoted. I got outvoted 1-1.
That is the week. Dan, just because we happen to have picked the exact same teams in the championship, Darren versus Horvath, I'm not even looking at the matchups. Can Horvath overcome and beat Darren based on these two teams?
Oh yeah, I think Darren his team has not been playing great. He
was terrible last week.
He peaked in week 8. Yeah. His team has been slowly declining. The schedule worked his way and he kept getting wins. I think Horvath's in a great spot to get his first win this year. I hope he gets it. I don't want any of you Weiss family functions to happen in the championship.
The real question is, obviously he'll have to come on the show. If it's me versus Taylor next week, I talk to Taylor just about every day now. Am I even going to be able to speak to him? Oh, the note I wanted to tell you, I was talking to Taylor today, and I was pondering out loud, Dan, the biggest mistake I've ever made letting Puka Nacua walk away. He smashes again last night. And I think we're talking about my team like we're talking about Darren's team if I got Puka fucking Nacua on my squad. And I certainly don't have the headache I have at wide receiver.
Whew, if you had Puka, man.
Let's be clear. If I hadn't cut Puka, let's make sure this sounds every bit as stupid as it is. He was sitting there, and I had to make final cuts, and I cut Puka Nacua. Even though I drafted him, I believed in him.
You didn't know. No, you didn't believe him and believe in him. You want to cut him to believe in him.
That's true.
No, not enough. You cut him. You can't tell me you believed in him because you cut him. I believed in Drew Brees 18 years ago too, Ryan. And I cut him.
What if this is my Drew Brees?
I hope it is. And I hope that I ride Puka to several winning seasons. Where obviously I didn't do it this year, but
I was gonna say I think he's already not my Drew Brees. Dan, you smashed in the game last week. 61 points. You actually called Christian McCaffrey as the RB1, not the hardest prediction in the world to make. But I had Jalen Hurts and Bijan Robinson, who got me negative points. So you won on the back of Christian McCaffrey alone. I imagine you're going to make me go first.
You know it.
Give me a second to get my rankings up. I already know who I'm going with at quarterback. It's Josh Allen. He is my number one ranked quarterback of the week. Plus, he happens to be on my opponent, so it should be his biggest week in history. Who do I want to go with otherwise? Because I know who my number one running back is always Christian McCaffrey, but I don't know if I want to pick him. And then Tyreek Hill, I don't think I want to pick him either. You know what? I'm not going to be dumb. I'll go one from him, one from me. I want to try to at least win this. Josh Allen, CMC, very boring picks, very predictable picks.
I'm going to go with a stack. I'm going to go Hurts and A.J. Brown.
Ooh.
I think Philly's going to be desperate. A.J. Brown, when they were just chucking the ball to him consistently is when they were playing their best. I expect them to get back to that against a inconsistent Giants defense.
I think that's fair. That is your 8th win of the season, Dan. 4 wins for me, 1 for Horvath, 1 for Phil, 1 for Taylor. If you guys want to drop any picks in the chat, I'll see them later. Drop them in the league chat. Shoot me a text message. We'll try to get you guys involved in the show. Clearly, none of you give a fuck, but I mean, the season is almost over. But we're going to keep this thing rocking. We'll definitely have a show next week, talk about the championship, and then we'll have a show sometime after that to talk about the draft order. Dan, parting words for our friends on this Christmas Eve.
I love you guys. Hope you guys have a great Christmas. Phil, I haven't heard from you since the state championship when Massillon won. Just want to make sure you're still okay. If you're just sad you haven't gotten a shirt yet, let me know what size you want. I'll get you a hat, a shirt, whatever you need, buddy. Just want to make sure you're okay.
Horvath going the extremely intelligent route and just picking his entire team. J. Jeff, Josh Allen, Horvath, best of luck. I know you watch the show with your kids, so it's very hard for me to say. We used to be roommates, but this weekend we are mortal fucking enemies. Fuck you, Horvath. Hope you have a terrible week. I hope you have a great Christmas. I hope your family has a great Christmas, but I hope you have a terrible Christmas. Hate you this week, Horvath. Terrible Christmas, except for the rest of your family. I hope they have a great Christmas because they deserve it. But you deserve nothing, and you're going to lose. Go part-time ninjas. Have a good night, guys.